Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast.
Glad to be here.
So, you know the exact feeling. You are right in the middle of this massive project.
Yeah.
Your inbox is completely overflowing. You're prepping for a really critical client meeting. And then suddenly you get that calendar alert.
Oh, the dreaded alert.
Right. Mandatory 3-hour compliance and software training.
That's a total momentum killer.
Completely derails your whole day. I mean, I remember a few years ago, I was forced to sit through this half-day seminar just to learn the nuances of a new expense reporting tool.
A half day for an expense tool.
Yeah. And by the time I actually had to submit an expense, which was like a month later, I had completely forgotten everything. I just had to ask a colleague anyway.
Of course. Because the traditional model of pulling you away from your desk for this massive data dump, it just simply does not align with the reality of how we work today.
No, it really doesn't.
It's highly inefficient. And frankly, it disrespects the learner's time because the modern professional landscape requires continuous upskilling. But it has to happen in the flow of work.
Right.
You need just-in-time performance support, not isolation in some windowless conference room. That is the exact paradigm shift we are exploring today.
And to guide this deep dive, we are leveraging a really comprehensive framework. It was developed by Felix Römer from SmartKeys.org, and it's titled Microlearning Strategy for Continuous Workforce Upskilling.
It's a great piece.
It really is. And this isn't just an overview of some passing trend. It's a literal strategic playbook for re-engineering how a business handles knowledge transfer.
Yeah, the mechanics of it are fascinating.
And the core concept driving this entire framework is brilliant. They treat microlearning as an espresso shot for skills.
I love that phrasing.
It's so good, right? It's highly concentrated, it's fast, and it delivers the specific jolt of knowledge right when you need to execute a task.
The espresso analogy is incredibly precise because we aren't talking about, watering down complex subjects.
Right, it's not training light.
Exactly. We were talking about distillation. It's about stripping away the fluff, the preamble, and all that theoretical background that you just don't need in that specific moment.
You just need the answer.
Yes. Delivering the exact functional mechanism required to overcome a hurdle on the job.
Okay, let's unpack this. If we look at the actual anatomy of modern microlearning, the data specifically, there are these studies from the Association for Talent Development.
Right, the ATD studies.
Yeah, they point to a very distinct sweet spot for effectiveness. We are talking about modules that are just 2 to 5 minutes long.
That's the golden window.
And I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. If we condense everything into a 2-minute window, don't we risk creating a workforce that only knows how to follow rote checklists?
That's a very common fear.
Like, don't we lose the deeper context and the actual why behind the work?
Yeah, that is the most common pushback you get from legacy instructional designers. And honestly, it's a valid concern if you misapply the tool.
How so?
Well, microlearning is not designed to teach foundational, deeply theoretical concepts. You aren't going to teach someone advanced contract law in 2 minutes.
Right. Or complex macroeconomic theory.
Exactly. But for the vast majority of daily corporate friction, how to process a specific type of refund, how to log a highly specific customer complaint in the CRM, how to operate a new piece of machinery on the floor context is secondary to execution.
You just need to know which button to press.
Yes. The 2 to 5 minute window is ruthlessly optimized for immediate behavioral change.
And to make that short window actually work, the framework introduces what I consider the absolute golden rule of this entire strategy.
One objective rule.
Yes, the one objective rule. Every single module must be tied to one and only one clear learning objective.
It's so critical.
And the litmus test they give is so simple. When you write out the goal of the module, if you find yourself using multiple verbs, you have to split the content.
Exactly. If your goal is learn how to access the portal A&D, generate the quarterly report, that is an immediate failure in microlearning design.
Because it's two things.
Right. Accessing the portal is one distinct action. Generating the report is another. By isolating these into single verb objectives, you ensure the unit is entirely self-contained.
Which means the learner can just drop in.
Drop in, find the exact solution to their immediate roadblock, and get right back to work without wading through prerequisite information they already know.
Which perfectly brings us to the underlying cognitive load theory, because we know that working memory is severely limited.
Oh, absolutely.
The human brain can generally handle about 5 to 9 chunks of information at any given time before it literally starts dropping data.
Right. Cognitive overload is the silent killer of corporate training. When you throw 40 slides of a new software architecture at an employee,
Their eyes just glaze over.
their working memory maxes out in the first 15 minutes. Microlearning explicitly respects that biological limit. By aggressively managing the cognitive load and presenting only 3 to 4 critical chunks of information tied to that single verb, the learner can actually encode the information into long-term memory.
And that encoding process is supercharged by spaced repetition, right?
Yes.
Instead of a single massive training event, you deploy these quick, shrinking refreshes of the information over days and weeks.
You're deliberately reactivating those neural pathways just as the natural forgetting curve starts to set in.
It's like a booster shot for your memory.
What's fascinating here is how this leverages the primacy and recency effects.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, psychologically, we are wired to remember the very beginning of an experience that's primacy, the very end of an experience which is recency.
Right.
The muddy middle of an hour-long lecture is almost entirely lost. But when your learning module is only 3 minutes long, virtually the entire experience consists of the beginning and the end.
Oh, wow. That makes so much sense.
You are structurally eliminating the middle where information decay happens.
So the behavioral science is rock solid, but transitioning from theory to practice requires a very specific toolkit. You can't just default to text or standard video for every single problem.
Definitely not.
The framework emphasizes matching the media format to the specific cognitive task. Like, if you are demonstrating a physical process or a software UI, a short screen capture video is ideal.
But if you are mapping out a complex decision tree,
A video is terrible because you can't scan it. You have to constantly pause and rewind.
exactly, that's where a high-contrast infographic comes in.
And we also see a heavy adoption of social media UX patterns in this space, too. Swipeable cards, interactive carousels, short visual captions.
Well, the workforce is already deeply conditioned to consume and parse information rapidly through these interfaces on their personal devices anyway.
We do it all day on our phones.
Right. Replicating those native mobile interaction patterns for corporate learning drastically reduces the friction of adoption.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. How does this actually look when deployed at scale? The article provides this great case study on the InterContinental Hotels Group.
That's a fantastic example.
They didn't just, upload a bunch of PDFs to a mobile server. They built highly targeted, gamified missions for their distributed quality teams.
Out in the field.
Yeah, these are employees moving between properties, auditing brand standards. Sitting them down at a desktop just isn't feasible.
The Intercontinental application is a masterclass in alignment. They integrated the training directly into the daily workflow of those quality inspectors.
Just slipping it right in.
Exactly. Between checking rooms or evaluating service standards, an inspector could pull out their phone and complete a 3-minute scenario-based challenge.
And they wrapped it all in gamification.
Right, using leaderboards, instant feedback loops, peer benchmarks. They transformed what is essentially a mandatory compliance task into an engaging, competitive exercise.
And the metrics were undeniable. They didn't just see a spike in completion rates, which, let's be honest, is often just a vanity metric.
Usually, yes.
They saw a measurable increase in intrinsic motivation. Employees were actually seeking out the next training module because it felt native to their workflow, and it immediately helped them score higher on their actual performance audits.
But to orchestrate that level of seamless, gamified delivery, you really have to invest in the right technological infrastructure.
What does that tech stack look like?
The framework highlights specific platforms that make this possible. You have tools like Centrical, which focuses heavily on driving engagement through gamification and real-time coaching.
Okay.
You have SC Training for constructing and distributing the actual micropaths, and platforms like Kahoot for rapid interactive knowledge checks.
I've used Kahoot before. It's great. But the real magic isn't just having these platforms, right? It's how they integrate. And the absolute non-negotiable requirement here is mobile-first delivery.
100%.
If your team cannot access these modules flawlessly on a smartphone while sitting on a train or waiting in a lobby, the entire just-in-time strategy completely collapses.
Mobile first is the baseline. But the true differentiator in this tech stack is the use of telemetry and adaptive learning paths.
Explain the telemetry part.
Modern platforms use data standards, like XAPI, to track an incredibly granular level of learner interaction. If a global sales team takes a quick diagnostic module on a new product line, the system algorithmically analyzes their responses in real time.
Right. So if an experienced rep aces the initial knowledge check, the adaptive path recognizes their proficiency and lets them skip the redundant instructional content,
They get their time back.
which is huge. But if a newer rep struggles with a specific objection handling scenario, the system instantly, dynamically routes them to an additional 2-minute practice module targeted exactly at that weak point.
The psychological impact of that cannot be overstated. When employees realize the training system actually respects their existing expertise.
And isn't just wasting their time.
Right. And only intervenes when they actually need help, the resistance to corporate learning plummets. It personalizes the upskilling process at a massive scale.
If we connect this to the bigger picture.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where the C-suite starts to pay attention. We're moving far beyond vanity metrics. We aren't tracking hours in a seat or videos watched anymore.
Nobody cares about that.
Exactly. Because these modules are tied to single specific behaviors, you can tie your learning analytics directly to hard business outcomes.
So you can measure if a specific 3-minute module deployed on a Tuesday actually led to a reduction in CRM data entry errors by Friday.
You are establishing a direct causal link between training and ROI. You can track error reduction on a manufacturing floor, sales uplift after a targeted product knowledge burst, or a decrease in average handling time in a call center.
But there is a massive systemic pitfall that organizations hit when they try to chase these metrics. The framework explicitly warns against what they call the chopping trap.
Oh yes, the chopping trap.
Yeah, this is such a crucial point. You cannot take your legacy 60-minute SCORM-compliant PowerPoint, hand it to an instructional designer, tell them to chop it into 12 5-minute segments and call it microlearning.
It's the worst thing you can do.
That is a recipe for absolute failure.
It fails because it violates the core tenets we just discussed. A chopped-up segment of a larger presentation lacks standalone context.
Right. It feels disjointed.
It usually doesn't align with a single actionable objective, and it certainly wasn't designed with cognitive load theory in mind. True microlearning must be purpose-built from the ground up to solve a specific workflow problem.
Now, if you are building hundreds or potentially thousands of these highly specific standalone modules, keeping that library organized sounds like an absolute logistical nightmare.
It can be.
How does a massive enterprise prevent their microlearning repository from just devolving into a chaotic graveyard of outdated content?
This raises an important question about governance. Scalability requires ruthless standardization. The framework dictates that you must use rigid, reusable templates.
Makes sense.
This does two things. It drastically accelerates the authoring process, and it creates a consistent user experience so the learner immediately understands how to navigate the information. Furthermore, you must establish strict module ownership.
Meaning a specific individual is accountable for that exact piece of content.
Yes.
So if there is a 2-minute video on the company's travel reimbursement policy, Jane in finance is tagged as the owner.
Right.
And she gets an automated alert every 6 months to verify if the policy has changed.
Precisely. You utilize robust metadata tagging. Tagging by role, by specific task, by software version, and by priority. This allows the underlying algorithm to automatically route the right content to the right employee while maintaining a clear audit trail for compliance and updates.
And a massive part of that governance is ensuring universal accessibility. If this library is going to serve as the central nervous system for your workforce's capabilities, it has to be frictionless for everyone.
Non-negotiable.
That means comprehensive captions on all video content, rootable text transcripts for any audio, high color contrast ratios for infographics, and full keyboard navigable interfaces.
And it's critical to understand that accessibility in this context is not merely an HR compliance checklist. It is a functional operational requirement.
Tell me more about that.
Consider a deskless worker, a mechanic on a noisy hangar floor, or a sales rep reviewing a module on a crowded, loud subway. They cannot rely on audio.
No, definitely not.
If your microlearning doesn't have impeccable closed captions and high-contrast visual cues, the learning is entirely blocked by the environment. Universal design ensures the knowledge is accessible regardless of the physical context.
So what does this all mean for the organization that wants to pivot? You understand the science, you see the ROI, but how do you actually execute this without paralyzing your team?
The big shift.
The framework lays out a highly pragmatic implementation roadmap, and it starts with a brutal content audit.
Audits are inherently full of friction. You are going to face legacy stakeholders who are deeply attached to their massive, comprehensive training decks.
Right, they don't want to let go.
The goal of the audit isn't to burn everything to the ground immediately. It's to identify the quick wins. You look for existing materials that are already somewhat modular, like a frequently asked questions document or a troubleshooting guide, and you re-engineer those into focused, single-objective microunits.
Once you have those quick wins, you map them to specific roles and sequence them from absolute must-know critical tasks to nice-to-know secondary skills.
Exactly.
But the pivotal step in this entire rollout strategy is the rapid pilot. You do not spend 6 months building 500 modules and launching them to the entire global enterprise in a massive PR blitz.
No, you utilize an agile methodology. You deploy a rapid pilot to a highly targeted small cohort. You use that small sample size to test the technological integration, measure the actual engagement levels, and analyze the telemetry from the knowledge checks.
You test the waters first.
Right. You establish a baseline of their performance metrics before the pilot,
Yeah.
and you compare it to the data gathered during the pilot.
You look for the gaps. Did they all fail the second knowledge check? If so, the module is flawed, not the learners.
Spot on.
You iterate, you refine the content based on hard data, and you only scale the specific modules that demonstrably improve on-the-job execution. It is a continuous loop of testing and refinement.
I want to leave you with a thought that projects this trend into the near future. We've discussed microlearning as a static library of highly optimized content. But consider the current trajectory of artificial intelligence.
Oh, this is fascinating.
What happens when AI and deep telemetry merge within the workflow? Imagine a scenario where a system observes an employee making a specific, repeated data entry error in their CRM.
Okay.
Instead of the employee searching a library for a fix, the AI instantly generates a bespoke, 90-second microlearning module complete with targeted microcopy and a custom infographic designed specifically to correct that single employee's exact behavioral error right in that very moment. It raises the possibility that the future of upskilling isn't about curating libraries at all, but about algorithms dynamically generating micro-interventions in real time.
That is a staggering concept to consider. It shifts the entire paradigm from proactive training to hyper-personalized reactive coaching generated on the fly.
The landscape is moving fast.
The mechanics of how we learn are fundamentally evolving, and mastering these micro-strategies now is the only way to prepare for that level of technological integration.
Absolutely.
I want to explicitly thank you for tuning in to the SmartKeys podcast today. We know your time is your most valuable asset, and we hope this deep dive provides you with the strategic leverage to optimize how you and your team build skills.
It's been a great conversation.
If you found this analysis valuable, hit subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss our future breakdowns. And I highly encourage you to explore the source material yourself. Check out Felix Römer's full playbook, Microlearning Strategy for Continuous Workforce Upskilling. Seeing the visual examples, the templates, and the detailed software breakdown will solidify the architecture we discussed today. The link to the full article is waiting for you right there in the show notes. Keep learning, stay adaptable, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.